It's a big day for millions of voters in America as they start heading to polling stations to pick their next president, with the candidates making their last push to win the White House. The world is watching this close race for its potential impact. Just hours before the U.S. election, North Korea fired multiple short-range ballistic missiles this morning over the East Sea, prompting a harsh warning from the South. The country's inflation in October continued to stay in the 1% range, marking the lowest in nearly 4 years. Prices of vegetables, however, sharply rose. It's November 5th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. We start with the latest from the U.S., where millions have started heading to polling stations to pick the country's 47th president. Our Choi Min-jung reports on what the atmosphere is like in the U.S. as voting begins.
Americans are heading to the polls to vote for the country's next president. The small New Hampshire town of Dixville Notch cast the first votes as early as midnight, with Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris and Republican nominee Donald Trump both getting 3 votes each. Elsewhere, polls began to open at 5 a.m. Tuesday morning Eastern Time, starting with Vermont. Security has been tightened around the White House with a 3-meter iron fence. Polling places nationwide are under 24-hour surveillance by the FBI, with National Guard troops on standby. This increased vigilance comes after the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol in 2021, when supporters of former President Donald Trump stormed the building in protest of the 2020 election result. On the eve of the election, Harris and Trump made their final pitches in battleground states. Harris spoke at the last rally of her campaign in Pennsylvania, spreading the message of unity and optimism. She reiterated her promises of lowering living and housing costs, taxes for small businesses, and advocating for abortion rights. And most importantly, Harris said she's ready to become the next president.
We know it is time for a new generation of leadership in America. And I am ready to offer that leadership as the next president of the United States of America.
Trump's final stop was Michigan. He promised to, quote, fix America.
This is all you need to know. I mean, Joe and Kamala broke it, and I will fix it. I'll fix it fast.
Trump stressed his real opponent isn't Harris, but instead an evil Democrat system. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The U.S. presidential election is not based on the popular vote, but it's based on a system called the Electoral College. Our Park Go-no explains how it works.
The U.S. presidential race is coming to an end. Beginning midnight on November 5th in Dixville Notch, a small village in New Hampshire, the in-person presidential vote will come to a close 25 hours later in Alaska. The U.S. uses the electoral vote instead of a popular vote system, so Tuesday's election is to select the Electoral College, which has a total of 538 votes, made up of 100 senators, 435 congressmen, and 3 electors from Washington, D.C. Democratic candidate Kamala Harris and Republican candidate Donald Trump will need at least 270 votes, also called the magic number, to ensure victory. This means that a candidate with more of the popular vote can still be defeated if they receive fewer Electoral College votes. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost the election to Trump, although she won around 2.9 million more votes. If Harris and Trump are tied on 269 votes, their fate will be decided by the House of Representatives in early January. The number of Electoral College votes differs by state based on the size of its congressional delegation, with states with bigger populations getting more electoral votes. For example, California, which has the largest population, has a total of 54 electoral votes, because California has 2 senators and 52 congressmen, while Wyoming, with the smallest population, has just 3, because it has 2 senators and 1 congressman. Most of the states follow the winner-takes-it-all rule, where the candidate who earns more votes within a state takes the whole electoral college. But Maine and Nebraska split their electoral votes, giving 2 to the state popular vote winner, and 1 vote for the winner in each of the state's congressional districts. After the Electoral College is selected, they'll participate in a ceremonial vote on December 17th, while the next U.S. president will be inaugurated on January 20th next year. With the poll results for the past several weeks showing a tight race, particularly in the 7 swing states, including Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia, it remains too close to call. And with the number of variables that could slow the process, including delays in counting mail-in votes as each state verifies tickets at different dates, and a possible recount in the case of a narrow victory, it could be as long as 2 weeks before we see a winner. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
As latest polls have been indicating, this presidential race is really deadlocked. For every detail, our Kim Bo-kyung is here in the studio. Welcome, Bo-kyung.
Hi, Jung-min. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Bo-kyung, so voters just began going to polling station. How many are expected to cast their ballots?
Well, Jung-min, according to the Bipartisan Policy Center, the number of eligible voters for this year's presidential election is estimated to be 244 million. Now, 4 years ago, during the 2020 presidential election, over 2/3 of eligible Americans voted, 66.8% to be exact, according to survey data from the Census Bureau. Now, that was more than 158 million votes, marking the highest voter turnout since 1900, which was 73.2%. If we take a look at the early voting turnout, roughly 82 million people had already cast ballots as of Monday, showing how enthusiastic voters are to choose the next president. It is lower than in 2020, but given that 2020 was the pandemic period, we could still say the figure is still on pace for a historical high compared with other previous years. And this is why experts say projections from early voting indicate that the overall turnout for the election will be probably between 60% and the 2/3 of eligible voters who voted in 2020.
We will definitely have to see how many voters turn out this year. And can you tell us the battleground states and what the latest polls suggest?
Of course. So except for Nebraska and Maine, all the states in the United States follow winners-take-all system, where the candidate who receives the majority of the votes takes all of the state's allocated electoral votes. The Electoral College, consisting of 538 electors, is distributed across America's 50 states and the District of Columbia. This means a candidate must secure at least 270 electoral votes to win the presidential election. And this is why many media outlets say it is the road to 270. Now, based on several reports, Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris has effectively secured 226 electoral votes, while former Republican President Donald Trump has secured 219. The remaining 93 votes from 7 battleground states are crucial in determining the outcome of the election. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are grouped as the 3 major battleground states in the Rust Belt region. They were once known for their strong Democratic support, being dubbed the Blue Wall. However, in the 2016 presidential election, former President Donald Trump swept these states, propelled by the strong appeal of his America First policy. While in 2020, Democratic candidate Joe Biden reclaimed them all back again. Meanwhile, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, and Georgia are swing states in the Sun Belt, which includes 15 states extending across the southern U.S. from southwest to southeast, and have hotter climates than the northern states. The latest polls are showing a close race between Harris and Trump, with some even contradicting each other's surveys in the 7 battleground states that I just mentioned. For example, final swing state polls from Emerson College and The Hill showed Trump having this edge in Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Arizona, while Harris was ahead in Michigan. In contrast, polls from the New York Times and Siena College showed that Harris had a slight lead in enough states to win the Electoral College.
Bo-kyung, so there are 93 electoral votes from 7 toss-up states, as our Park Gon-woo has been reporting. 2 states do not take a winner-takes-all approach. Tell us about this in detail.
Sure. So we talked about how a candidate can win this race through the system called the Electoral College. But two states do not follow this winners-take-all system, but instead allows electoral votes to be split, and they are Nebraska and Maine. Now, in Nebraska, 2 of 5 electoral votes go to the winner of the statewide vote, and the rest of the electoral vote goes to the winner in each of Nebraska's 3 congressional districts. Now, Nebraska is largely a red state, but the swing district around Omaha, the state's largest city, is called the Blue Dot, as it went blue for the first time in 2008, voting for former President Barack Obama, and then went blue again for President Joe Biden in 2020. Now in Maine, 2 of 4 electoral votes go to the statewide winner and 2 go to the winners in each of the 2 congressional districts. Maine is a Democratic stronghold, but the 2nd congressional district, where 72% is rural, is known as a red dot, with Republican-leaning voters having supported Trump in both the 2016 and 2020 elections.
Of course, we will have to closely look at these states as well. Thank you, Bo-kyung, for the report.
Thank you.
Now, the result of the U.S. presidential race will have implications that go beyond its borders. That being said, our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji takes a look at the prospects of partnership between Seoul and Washington, as well as their efforts to ease tensions on the Korean peninsula under a new U.S. leadership.
The 2 candidates, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, have starkly differing views on how to share the cost for American troops stationed in Korea. In an op-ed to South Korean local media, Harris said the alliance between Seoul and Washington has been a linchpin of security and prosperity, while noting that South Korea is already paying sizable contributions to have American troops in the country. Last month, the 2 countries reached a deal on this issue after going through 5 months of negotiation. Whereas Harris will likely stick to this agreement, Trump has hinted at an attempt to renegotiate, saying Washington cannot be taken advantage of any longer in military and trade. He's been insisting that Seoul should be paying $10 billion a year, describing South Korea as a money machine. Many experts say that South Korea needs to be prepared for renegotiation should Trump take office again.
So, I think that we could definitely see an attempt to renegotiate the special measures agreement. That could cause alliance friction. I think that we could see a Trump administration attempt to try to repurpose the USFK, so the U.S. Forces Korea, to be postured more flexibly to deal with regional contingencies. And by that, one mostly understands a potential problem.
The 2 candidates also plan to take notably different approaches on how to deal with North Korea. Experts suggest that if Harris wins, we will see the new administration focus on strengthening relations with allies and partners to address nuclear threats from North Korea.
For Harris, denuclearization of North Korea remains the ultimate goal, but what's more important is working with allies to deter the North, so she will continue to focus on strengthening deterrence against North Korea's nuclear program by reassessing and enhancing cooperation with allied nations.
But a second Trump presidency could pose a significant risk for South Korea.
Trump will likely try to manage the North Korean nuclear crisis through a top-down diplomacy with Kim Jong-un. Going further, there is a possibility that he may recognize North Korea as a nuclear-armed state and partially or fully lift sanctions, initiating a nuclear arms reduction negotiation. This could potentially become a significant risk factor for South Korea.
However, both the Democratic and Republican parties have removed the term CVID, or Complete Verifiable Irreversible Denuclearization, in their new policy platforms. While it is too early to say that this fully reflects the new administration's policies, it raises speculation that the U.S. government may be shifting its priorities away from North Korea. The South Korean government says it's ready to respond appropriately, regardless of the outcome of the election. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
North North Korea test-fired a round of short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea this morning. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil has the details.
The South Korean military has condemned North Korea's recent provocations, labeling them as despicable and warning that such actions will only isolate the regime further, effectively turning it into a, quote, harsh prison. On Tuesday morning, North Korea fired several short-range ballistic missiles into the East Sea, launched from the Sariwon area in Hwanghae-bukdo province at around 7:30 a.m. The missiles traveled approximately 400 kilometers in what was North Korea's second missile test in just 5 days, following the launch of the new Hwasong-19 intercontinental ballistic missile on Thursday.
These missile launches are a blatant disregard for UN Security Council resolutions and pose a significant threat, escalating tensions on the Korean peninsula. We will once again warn that North Korea will bear full responsibility for the consequences of their actions.
Tuesday's missile launch followed joint air drills by South Korea, the US, and Japan over the weekend. In response, Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, warned that these drills pose a serious threat to North Korea and highlight the need for the regime to enhance its defense capabilities.
These launches are a direct response to recent joint air drills by South Korea, the US, and Japan, while also signaling North Korea's presence ahead of the US presidential election.
Professor Kim Jae-chun of Seogang University adds that these provocations may also be intended to influence the election.
This is to remind the U.S. of the fact that they are still a power to be reckoned with, and maybe to help Donald Trump a little bit in this tight race to have a nuclear arms reduction talk with Donald Trump if Donald Trump goes back to the White House.
He added that Pyongyang may also want to show its military readiness despite recently sending troops to Russia. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
South Korea's defense ministry says some 10,000 North Korean troops have arrived in Russia to support its war against Ukraine. In a press briefing on Tuesday, the defense ministry spokesperson said a significant number of the troops are believed to be in frontline areas, including Kursk. But when asked about a South Korean media report saying that as many as 40 North Korean soldiers have been killed on the battlefield, he said he had no information. The remarks come hours after the Pentagon said that there are at least 10,000 North Korean soldiers near the Ukraine border, but said it cannot confirm reports that they were engaged in combat. Shifting gears, inflation stayed within the 1% range last month, noting its slowest momentum in some 4 years. Prices of vegetables, however, have shot up. Lee Soo-jun has numbers.
Consumer prices in South Korea are showing signs of stabilizing, with inflation remaining in the 1% range for the second straight month in October. Data released by Statistics Korea on Tuesday showed that the country's consumer price index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 1.3% compared to the same month the previous year. The on-year rise is also the lowest seen since January 2021. The rise in consumer prices had been in the 2% range since April, before dropping to 1.6% in September. The slowing of inflation last month was mainly driven by the cost of petroleum products falling 10.9% on year, marking the sharpest drop in 15 months.
The drop in prices of petroleum and fruit products was greater, lowering the rise in consumer prices in October 2024 by 0.3 percentage points from the previous month to 1.3% on year.
Fruit prices fell more than 10% on year in October, with apple prices plunging 20%. But overall prices of agricultural, livestock, and fisheries products were up 1.2% on year. Vegetables in particular saw a sharp rise, jumping 15.6% compared to the same month the year before, the highest seen since October 2022. Key ingredients of kimchi, an important staple of Korean cuisine, remained high, with prices of Napa cabbages up 51.5% on year and radishes up 52.1%. To address the high prices, the first Vice Minister of Economy and Finance at a Vice Ministerial Economic meeting on Tuesday said that the government will carry out measures to stabilize vegetable prices.
The supply of Napa cabbages will go up 10% compared to the previous year to 24,000 tons. And starting from October 24, there were discounts of up to 40% on cabbages and radishes to alleviate the burden on consumers.
The Bank of Korea, which also held a meeting on Tuesday to evaluate prices, assessed that while prices are stabilizing, consumer price inflation may return to the 2% range towards the end of the year due to base effect from low oil prices at the end of last year, as well as a result of the U.S. election. 이수진, Arirang News.
Exports of the Korean agri-food business have reached a record high thanks to a K-food craze in many other countries. According to the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, the exports of Korean agri-food from January until October this year were up by almost 9% from a year earlier, reaching some $8.2 billion. The export value of processed rice, instant noodles, and snacks recorded $250 million, up by 41.9%. Ramen was listed on the top among the items. On the local front, a public presidential address and a press conference will be held this coming Thursday to share the administration's policy gains as well as a host of allegations raised by the opposition party. Our correspondent Woo Soo-young reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol will deliver a public address and press conference at 10 a.m. this Thursday as he marks the midpoint of his presidency this week. A senior presidential official said Monday that the South Korean leader will explain what he's achieved so far and the direction of his policies in the remainder of his term. This will be Yoon's first press conference in about 2.5 months since the end of August. The format will likely follow the same structure as his most recent press conference, with the president delivering a national address first, followed by a Q&A session with reporters. According to the senior aide, Yoon will address all questions regarding matters of public interest. This could well include recent allegations that he and First Lady Kim Gon-hee may have interfered in party politics in 2022. The opposition party last month leaked a recorded phone call between Yoon and Myung Tae-gyun, an obscure political consultant, during which they discussed the ruling party's candidate selection process ahead of a by-election. Initially, the presidential office was leaning towards holding the press conference around the end of the month, following Yoon's diplomatic engagements, but the leader reportedly took his aide's advice to make a public address before his overseas trip. It appears the date was moved up after Yoon's approval ratings dropped below 20% last week, and the opposition steps up its offensive against First Lady Kim, vowing to pass a bill mid-month to launch a special investigation against her. Throughout his term, Yoon has been targeted with various accusations surrounding his wife's alleged misconduct and influence over his administration and personnel. His office has expressed hope that the upcoming press conference will bring clarity through Yoon's comprehensive explanations to the public. As he marks the halfway point of his term, the president's tone and rhetoric on Thursday could mark an inflection point in the domestic political landscape. Woo Soo-young, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, a volcanic eruption on the Indonesian island of Flores has killed at least 10 people and left thousands evacuated from their homes. The eruption at Mount Lewotobi Laki-laki happened on Sunday night and continued to see small explosions on Monday night. Scorching lava headed to nearby villages, burning houses and infrastructure. The number of deaths may increase as the search and rescue process continues. The volcano erupted for the first time in 20 years last December and continued to see eruptions early this year.
This morning was the coldest this fall in the central parts of the country. Although it's an unofficial figure, some places in central inland areas were at below zero, with temperatures in Panmunjom near Paju, Gyeonggi-do province, falling to minus 0.7 degrees Celsius. According to official records, Cheoron in Gangwon-do province fell to 1.9 degrees, and Gangwon-do Island in Incheon to 3.7 degrees. Until tonight, the East Coast will be cloudy with 5 to 20 millimeters of rain. In the mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province, where temperatures are low, about 2 centimeters of snow has already accumulated. Please be careful with slippery roads. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gyeongju will start off at 4 degrees, Busan 8 degrees. Highs will move up to 12 degrees in Chuncheon, Busan and Jeju 16 degrees. This cold will gradually ease off with temperatures recovering from the weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
And that is Newscenter for tonight. Thanks for watching. A panel session coming up.